What is up, everybody? Welcome to Where All the Ladies At, Myth Edition. I am Kim, your host, and I am a history nerd and lover of all things weird and wacky. It's what I do for a living. Actually, that's pretty close. That's pretty close, that statement. I thought it was going to be funny, but it's more accurate than you think. It's March. So, that means it's Women's History Month, although it is pretty much Women's History. Sorry, guys, I'm trying something new with my hair, and my hair is doing some crazy things. It is Women's History Month, although, like I was about to say, it is pretty much Women's History Month every month here on Where All the Ladies At. This month, I'm specifically focusing on ensuring that we're celebrating the voices of women in particular, and this month we are, oh my god, you have no idea. This month on the Myth Edition, we're focusing on sun goddesses. And that's kind of a strange thing. And we'll go into that in a few minutes. But yeah, it's kind of, I wanted to do something different to show that typically in most mythologies, the moon is the female and the sun is a male, masculine energy. But I have a couple of really cool options to discuss. As I said, this month is Women's History Month, and so we're going to be celebrating here the sun goddesses, like I said. But on Thursday's episode, we're going to be focusing on women who stand up against fascism and philosophers. So it's really cool. I've got some really cool women. Simone de Beauvoir, I hope I pronounced that right. Hannah Arendt, Dorothy Thompson, and Sophie Scholl. So those are some of the names that are coming on Thursday's episodes. And I thought, with what's going on in the world, what better than to talk about some women who had some philosophies that go are counterintuitive to fascism, which most philosophy is, and also that stood up against the rise of fascism, and some of them even lost their lives for it. So it's going to be a really, really cool month of diving into some badass ladies. Sorry, I'm trying not to cuss, guys. I really am. I'm going to try to use some corner terms. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Excess terms. Because I do, when I get passionate, sometimes cuss a little bit. Before we jump into today's episode, for Where All the Ladies Myth Edition, which is about Sol, the Norse sun goddess. Of course, there's some things that we gotta chat about, but after this interesting intro that I created, hopefully it's good. Alright, guys. I'm trying new things, trying to make the videos a little bit more engaging. Once again, I'm Kim, and I am your friendly neighborhood history nerd. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do that. There's ways to do that in the description box. There's also ways to support the podcast. You can like, follow, subscribe, share, comment, do all those cool things. If you want to toss a little scratch my way, you can definitely do that as well. There's links in the description box to do that. Also, there is links in the description box to the Medium publication that goes with this podcast, as well as my other podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip, where I talk about everything from tarot to crystals to this month Atlantis. Yeah, it's everything that you might think of that's weird, wacky, and I guess some people might call woo-woo. So if that's something you're into, check it out. It's kind of cool. So let's just jump into it. I think it's time, right? So here's the thing. Like I said at the intro, many mythologies, in fact, probably a majority of them, the sun is represented by a god. It's just kind of the way it's viewed. But the Norse viewed the sun as a goddess, that played a very, very big role in the cosmos. She wasn't just this simple celestial body, but really an active part of the Norse understanding of the universe. Sol was the embodiment, or is, if you still follow Norse mythology. There's a big Neo-Norse paganism movement which I think is very interesting. But if you do, she represents vitality and, you know, power. She drives a chariot across the sky, much kind of like Apollo in the Greek myths. But she's consistently pursued by a ravenous wolf called Skoll. And I think I'm saying that right, guys. I'm pretty good with Germanic names, but Nordic and Norse names sometimes. So it wasn't merely just driving across, right? She was in constant fear for her life, right? She didn't just handle that, though. She was definitely looked at being super important when it comes to agricultural cycles, timekeeping, and even spiritual practice. There is a lot of evidence to show that the sun played a significant part in the culture as well as the religion of the Norse through things like the Trundholm sun chariot and other things of that nature. So let's dive in. I'm super stoked. She is just, you know me, I'm a nerd. I love it. All right, so who was she, right? Who was Sol? Sol, and in High German, in Old High German, sometimes Sol is conflated to Sunna. She was the representation of the sun, like I said. She was the daughter of, hold on, let me look at my notes, Mundilfari, and his name literally meant the one who moves according to time. And of course, that's pretty fitting, seeing as how most Norse were telling the time by the sun. Most people tell the time by the sun, right? She had a twin brother. His name was Mani, and he was the moon, right? So here that is. That's the conflation of the typical, you know, the sun is the male, the moon is the female, right? Because when we look at the sun, it's aggressive. It's more like proactive. The moon is a representative of water and emotions. So this dichotomy is kind of pretty interesting to me. And if I'm truthful with you, I know a lot about mythology. I've said that before, but I had never known this. So when I started looking into sun goddesses, the fact that Norse popped up, I thought it was going to get a lot of like abstract mythologies, but Norse, like, and I'm pretty good with Norse mythology, but apparently I didn't know everything, right? So the two of them, the twins, they kind of tied the cycle of night and day together, right? They travel the skies together. But their fate, the way they became this, because once again, remember, she wasn't born a goddess, right? Their father was very proud of their beauty, right? And named them after the sun and the moon. And, you know, he's like, hey, no name is going to fit you just right, so we're going to we're gonna name you after them. And the gods said, you know what, that's pretty freaking arrogant that you want to name your children after the most beautiful things in the sky. So they were offended, and so there was punishment to be had, as is the case in almost every mythology. Sorry guys, I'm kind of starting to have a little cold, but I'm fighting it. It's not going to happen. So punishment. And when they thought punishment, they thought, you know what? You want to be named after these very important celestial beings? Then you're going to be. And so they bound them to these chariots and said, now you are not doomed, but you're responsible for doing this every day for eternity. So she was born mortal, but she became something possibly, if you think about it, even greater than a god, right? She was a driving force in everything. Her chariot was drawn by, and I want to look at these words because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm probably going to butcher these bad. Was pulled by two steeds, Arveker and Elsvior. And they went across the skies every day. and basically made sure Midgard, or Earth, stayed fruitful and habitable. You know, if she disappears, everything would fall into darkness. Um, and that meant that work wouldn't be able to work, harvest wouldn't be able to go, all this stuff would happen. But, you know, Soul wasn't free, as I said. Skull was this monstrous wolf who, like, wanted to devour her and cast the world into shadow, right? Um, and the people of Earth, or Midgard in this case, feared this, right? Because that would be the heralding of Ragnarok, right? If the sun disappeared, it's like one of the signs that Ragnarok is coming. And if you don't know what Ragnarok is, it's basically like the end of all things. It's the end of the world. And because that's how they felt, you know, Earth has eclipses. The sun does disappear sometimes. And when that happened, it freaked people the frick out, right? They felt that Skull was on the prowl, was about to, you know, devour the sun. And then at those points, the Norse would gather and they would cry and they would bang their weapons against their shields and try to make noise, thinking that that noise would frighten Skull away, right? And that would allow Soul to escape. To people of Midgard, or Earth, as I keep saying, she was life. Her light was their guiding force. You know, um, days, seasons, all of these things are dictated by the sun. And so they would honor her with offerings and everything, and you know, have rituals. Ooh, I gotta dye my hair. Rituals and things like that. And so, yeah, that's kind of who Soul was. She's very interesting, you know, the fact that she was mortal and became such a powerful entity in the Norse spirituality. Um, Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. So, you know, we always like to, hold on a second, my computer's doing something crazy. You know, we always like to hear on where I say we, but I'm solo right now. Maybe someday there'll be a we. I mean, I do have multiple personalities sometimes, but not in this case. Um, I like to always look at what it was like for women in the mythology as well as in the culture, because you can see a lot of correlations between what was happening in reality and what happened in stories, right? So with the Norse people, women were depicted as pretty powerful figures, even in shaping the fates of gods as well as men. You know, Freya and Frigg, they all played pretty big roles in mythologic narratives, right? Even the Norns, which I would say the Norns, if you're trying to figure out what the Norns are, they're very comparable to the Greek fates. Right? So women were in charge of the destiny of all things. And if you look at those roles, that shows that in the culture itself, women were looked at as having a prominent role in it, right? Outside of mythology, you can see this, right? Norse women were given much more autonomy than many of their contemporary counterparts in other cultures, right? Women could own property. They could initiate divorce. They could wield considerable influence in their households. There is some talk of even them being warriors, right? You know, there's some historical accounts, there's some archaeological findings that says that maybe there were some female Viking warriors, right? And Soul, being the goddess she was, you know, this showed even more esteem for her, right? She's not maybe one of the more well-known Norse gods and goddesses, but I think she's the perfect example of how women were viewed in the society. That's my opinion, by the way. So Sol was not a warrior goddess, you know, and that's different. A lot of the goddesses in the Norse mythology had some form of warrior concept to them. She wasn't a god in just in general, right? So I think if you look at her story, right? So she's the sun goddess, and the wolf is constantly chasing her. It's definitely a an allegory of, like, and I think I'm using that term right. Sometimes I use words and I don't know. I'm a writer, but sometimes it happens. Between, like, the battle between light and dark, right? Time is cyclical, and she's gonna come and go. The sun is going to leave the world in Ragnarok. But here's the thing, and this is something that's very interesting. I know a lot of people talk about Ragnarok, right? It's the end of the world, everything collapses, da 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 da. But it also is cyclical, right? This is a big thing, and so after Ragnarok happens, the world will be born again, and so will Soul in some aspects. Because what happens is, when Soul is gone, when Ragnarok is over and the world starts to recover itself, her daughter is going to take her place, right? And that makes sure that the sun continues to go. So yeah, it's kind of cool, right? Like, I think if you look at a lot of the old mythologies, and this is why I love mythology so much, they're actually pretty. Granted, there's some questionable things that happen. Don't get me wrong, and we'll talk about those as we go to them. There is definitely some questionable things in our eyes that happen, right? There's a lot. There's some assault. There's some incest. There's a lot of things that happen that are questionable. But in general, the overall theme is always cyclical, and it's always actually pretty, at least of the mythologies I know a lot of, is very positive, right? Because even if the world ends in Ragnarok, the world is going to be reborn and rebuild itself. So it's like that perpetual, like, sometimes things have to happen, sometimes things have to burn to the ground before beautiful things can come out, start blooming, right? And unfortunately, that is the case in most parts. All right, so what about worship? So, of course, we've already talked. Soul is all about life, renewal, time, all that kind of stuff, right? Things that you can awfully find associated with her were like golden discs, spirals, solar wheels. A lot of those are found on artifacts across Scandinavia. Worship of the sun in the Norse and Germanic traditions, because they do cross over. Like many of the old faiths, definitely included some solstice celebrations, right? Maybe the fires were lit in honor and left to burn. A lot of people, and please don't come at me, this is historically and scholarly. I'm not. You guys know I'm a pagan. I'm a Wiccan. So I just want to be real clear with that. I like being transparent. A lot of scholars say that things like pre-Christian celebrations like Yule probably had some connections to Soul, because Yule, as well as the Celtic Samhain, all of those are celebrations of the returning of light. So it would make sense that a sun goddess would be worshipped at that time. She definitely, because of the, I don't want to say stereotypes, but the archetypes is what the word I'm looking for, of her driving a chariot and everything, and the way she's chased, it's very reminiscent of many other cultures, and so it does seem to tie her to the other Indo-European sun deities, and shows that Norse definitely had some solar worship involved. All right, so what about archaeological? This is one of my favorites. I love talking about archaeology. So here's the thing. When we're talking about these kind of things, sometimes there's not a lot of evidence, right? We do know a lot about soul, but it comes from sources that were written after um, after the Vikings. Fell? I don't think that's the right term, but it's the word that came to mind. You can find mentions in like the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. There's definitely some sun worship in that, right? Um, Especially in the pre-Christian Norse and Germanic belief system. One of the biggest examples of solar worship in the Norse is called the Trundholm Sun Chariot. This is an artifact that was discovered in Denmark, and it's a Bronze Age artifact, and it has like intricate sculpture. It's my words. It's an intricate sculpture that features a horse pulling a large gilded sun disk. Right. It's pretty epic, and I'll put a picture here. This is kind of cool. I kind of miss being able to put little pictures. I can talk about it all day long on the podcast, and if you're listening on the podcast, maybe this might be why you check out my YouTube channel too. But you can do both. You can do both. It's a different experience, right? I'll put a little picture right here of the Trondheim Sun Chariot. It's pretty cool. On top of that, there's also some Scandinavian rock carvings that came from like the Bronze Age as well, and it has sun symbols and chariots, and this once again ties those two symbols together. So yeah, there is some archaeological evidence. Is it directly, does this like soul was here? No, but it's definitely some examples of how the sun played a big role. Now, here is my favorite part of the whole video. Well, this is just cool, all in general. I'm having so much fun with this. I am going to tell you a story. It's story time, guys. So, per the usual, please grab your drink of choice, whether that be a cocktail or a hot cocoa. Curl up with a blankie, maybe grab your kitty. Because, by the way, cats are big for the Norse religion. That's right. What the heck? I like it. All right. So I'm going to tell you a story. So settle back and let's see how this goes. I am going to be looking down a little bit, guys, because I can't memorize this. I'm too old for that. I'm too old for that. All right. Let's do that. All right. So in the earliest days of creation, before the world had taken its final shape, the gods hewed the cosmos from the vast and lifeless corpse of Ymir. I think I'm saying that right, the first giant. His bones became the mountains, his blood the sea, and from his skull they forged the sky, a great dome above the newborn realms. But the world was dark, and the gods, knowing that life could not flourish in endless shadow, sought to bring forth light. Thus they placed Sol in the heavens, her radiant form infused with the searing fire of Muspelheim, the realm of flame. She shone with a golden brilliance that bathed Midgard in warmth, awakening the seeds and banishing the cold grasp of night. But the gods, wise in their crafting, knew that unchecked, her light would scorch the earth and wither all that grew. To temper her power, they gifted her two mighty steeds, Arvakr, the early riser, whose strength never faltered with the dawn, and Alsvior, the swift one, faster than the winds that whispered through the world trees' branches. These noble horses bore her shining chariot across the heavens, their hooves striking embers from the sky as they raced forever forward. Yet Sol's journey was never one of peace. From the depths of the shadow, a relentless doom followed her. Skuld, a monstrous wolf born of the giantess Angriboa, prowled the skies in tireless pursuit, his eyes burning with hunger, his maw ever open, yearning to swallow the sun whole. He was a beast of consuming darkness, a terror spun from the world before time began. Day after day, Sol drove her chariot onward, her golden hair streaming behind her like rivers of fire. The sky trembled beneath the thundering of her steeds, and a radiance painted the world in hues of amber and crimson. But always behind her skull, breath filled the air with the chill of oblivion. His massive paws pounded against the unseen paths of heaven, his snarling jaws snapping at her heels, closing the distance inch by inch. It is said that this chase will last until the end of days, until Ragnarok, the twilight of all things, when the final battle is waged, when the sky shatters and the sea boils. Skoll will at last reach her. He will seize her in his monstrous jaws, and the sun will be swallowed, plunging the world into a darkness from which there is no dawn. Yet all is not lost. Even in the face of doom, hope flickers like a single unwavering ember. Before her fall, Sol will bear a daughter, a new son, hidden away until the appointed time, when the old world crumbles and a new one rises from the ashes. This young goddess will ascend in her mother's place. She will drive her own chariot across the reborn sky, her light kissing the land with warmth once again, heralding a new age for gods and men alike. And so, the chase continues, an eternal race between fire and shadow, between day and night, between the inevitable end and the promise of rebirth. Pretty cool, right? It's definitely an interesting story, and I am so excited that I got to learn about Soul. I hope you did too. I hope you enjoyed this. You know, her story is like about endurance and renewal and all that, and she is a force of nature, and it is amazing that she is a sun goddess. You know, not to take anything away from the moon goddesses, because I think that's an important role too, but the sun has such a pivotal part in everything. The fact that there is sun goddesses and that there were cultures that acknowledged that, so cool, so cool. So if you guys enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to subscribe. Please don't forget to leave a review. Please don't to share it with your fellow mythology lovers. That would be amazing. And please come back next time so that we can uncover more about amazing goddesses. And historical figures too, because I also have an episode on Thursdays, right? That's where all the ladies at is focused more on women in history. So, yeah, come join us. Let's see. And if you guys want to reach out to me, you can do so in my social media or an email. That is in the description box as well. If you want to support the podcast, please do like I asked, like, subscribe, follow, comment, thumbs up, do everything you can. And if you can't do, if you want to do more and you want to give me slide me a little cash, you can do that through the links to my Buy Me a Coffee and my Patreon. There's also links to the Medium publication that is tied with this, where you get more in-depth info on the people I cover, as well as a bunch of other things. And also a link to my other podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip, which is more of a spiritual, mystical, magical kind of content there. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check it out. And as always, guys, you know, take a good look at don't look directly at the sun, but let the sun's warmth warm you, and stay curious, and I'll see you next time.